Did you know that your brain reacts to a breakup the same way that it reacts to a drug withdrawal? It's not just that your heart is hurting, it's your entire nervous system is going through a withdrawal from a person that you were emotionally addicted to. Now, it's tough when, there was no big fight, no cheating, no lies, no abuse, just two people who cared deeply and still had to let each other go. That's what makes mutual breakups pretty tough. You don't have someone to blame, so you blame yourself. You question everything. Should we have tried harder? Was the timing off? Maybe we'll find our way back one day. But hope can be a blessing or a prison. And a lot of you are stuck not because, they were so perfect, but because you kept clinging on to what might have been. If you've been scrolling their page, still checking if they watched your story, still secretly hoping for that one last message that says, I miss you, then this video is for you. Because I'm going to give you some deeply transformational truth that won't just help you get over them, they'll help you get back to you. Also know that this video is not for the people who got cheated on, lied to, gaslit, manipulated, or emotionally abused. This one is specifically for those who were, trying to heal after a mutual breakup. Though to be fair, these truths, well, they can help you no matter how your relationship ended. I just want to make an announcement real quick. If you're going through a breakup right now, or you're silently holding on to someone who walked away, someone who made you question your worth, I made something for you. It's a free digital guide called 30 Days to Emotional Freedom. 30 raw, powerful mantras that you can read every day to help you start overthinking, stop settling, and start healing. Now, these aren't just nice words. They're the kind of mantras that wake you up, that kind of remind you who the hell you are when you feel like your identity has been tied to someone who didn't see your value. And I get it. I know how it feels to stare at your phone waiting for a text that never comes, to overanalyze every word, to pray for closure that may never show up. But you don't need closure from them. What you need is restoration from within. And that's what this is. This guide is a reset for your heart, your mind, your self-respect, and it's completely free. All you have to do is click the link in the description, drop your email, and I'll send it straight to your inbox. And when you do, you also get access to private content I only send to my inner circle, live updates, and upcoming products that can 100% change your healing journey. So if your heart's been asking for a sign to let go, to move on, to remember your power, this is it. Get your free copy by checking out the link in the description down below. But back to today's video. So something tells me you haven't fully let go. That's why you're having trouble moving on from this mutual breakup. You're still leaving the door open just in case. That's why you're watching their stories. That's why you haven't blocked their number. That's why you're still wondering if they might change their mind, because deep down, you haven't truly accepted the ending. But you can't heal in a room where your hope still lives. Every time you check their page, revisit old photos, or casually bring them up in conversations, you're feeding an emotional addiction. That dopamine hit of what if is keeping you chained to the past. Mutual breakups are dangerous because most mutual breakups are calm and peaceful, which sounds beautiful until you realize it keeps the illusion alive. If you start playing the mental game, maybe we just need time. Maybe we'll circle back. Maybe the story isn't over. But if God allowed it to end, then there's a reason. Stop trying to resurrect what got already buried. Sometimes you have to block the door, not because you're angry, but because your peace matters more than their presence. This isn't about bitterness. It's about boundaries. Closure, it doesn't come from texting them one last time. It comes from finally saying, I trust God's plan more than my need for closure. Delete texts and photos, mute their page. If you want to move forward, you must stop reaching backwards, because as long as you keep the door cracked, you'll never walk through the one that God is trying to open. And you got to stop playing emotional Russian roulette. You know what I'm talking about. You break up, you cry, you miss them, you text again, go out on a date and talk about maybe getting back together. And you rinse and repeat this bullshit game. And every time you play, you're gambling with your peace. If it takes 5 breakups to get it right, maybe it's not right. As the Bible says in Proverbs 26:11, as a dog returns to his vomit, so fools repeat their folly. That's a graphic verse, I know, but also accurate. God didn't create you to get stuck in an emotional loop. He created you to grow. If your relationship has more sequels than the Fast and Furious franchise, it might be time to pull the plug. You don't need to try again. You need to try something different. You don't need to make it work. You need to make you work. And, that starts with breaking the cycle before the cycle breaks you. Here's what most people don't understand about mutual breakups. They need to be grieved just like a death, because in a very real way, a part of your life has died. The routines, the jokes, the late night calls, the plans, the shared dreams, all of it. But we don't treat it like a death. We try to act casual. We're still cool. We're still friends. We just need space. So you postpone the pain, you smile through it, you keep it light, but under the surface, your soul is screaming. Eventually, that pain starts to leak out in the form of anxiety, emotional fatigue, and delayed heartbreak. You need to cry. You need to write that goodbye letter, not to send it, but to release. You need to, sit in the silence and let the void echo until it finally breaks something open in you. Even Jesus cried in the tomb of Lazarus, even though he saw the resurrection coming. So yes, cry, let it hurt, but don't live there. Build a home in hope, not in heartache. And if you're still asking yourself, what if we tried harder? What if we stayed together just a little longer? What if we're, still meant to be, just not now? If those questions are still haunting your mind, I get it. What if is the heartbreak anthem. It's the mental movie that we play on repeat, when we're desperate for an alternate ending. But what if it doesn't heal you? It keeps you sabotaged. The more time you spend in hypotheticals, the longer you delay your reality. Know that, you're not a failure for letting go. You're not giving up. You're simply honoring reality over fantasy, because every what if robs you of the what now. It blinds you to the lessons. It blocks your growth. It paralyzes your purpose. You're not in a romantic movie. You're in real life. And in real life, clinging to a story that already ended only keeps you from the one that God wants to write next. And I'm aware, you didn't just lose a relationship. You lost a piece of yourself in the process, and that's what makes mutual breakups so disorienting. Because when two people care deeply, they intertwine, their dreams merge, their routines sync, their identities overlap. Then one day, boom, it ends, and suddenly you're staring at the mirror asking, well, who am I without them? You got so used to being a part of we that you forgot just to be you. Understand that you are not a half of a whole. You are whole, and you've always been. A breakup, it doesn't break you unless you let it. And just because someone left, it doesn't mean your identity left with them. This season, it isn't about moving on. It's about moving back to yourself, to your goals, and to your joy, and to your God-given purpose. If you're thinking, but I don't even know where to start, that's okay. Start small, journal, pray, go out for a walk without your phone. You're not rebuilding, you're rediscovering. You can't be friends with someone you still have feelings for if you're serious about healing. Staying friends after a mutual breakup, it sounds mature, it sounds noble, but in practice, it's an emotional quicksand. Every time you text just to check in, every time you grab lunch, every time, they like your post and you feel that little, heart flutter, you're not healing, you're reattaching, You think that, staying friends keeps you close to them, but what it actually does is it keeps you further from yourself. You compromise, you overthink every interaction, you rehearse what to say, you shrink your emotions to seem chill, and for what? A front row seat to watch them, slowly move on without you? If you're calling it friendship, but still checking if they like someone else's pictures, you're not friends. You're just a surveillance drone with feelings. I'm not saying friendship is impossible forever, but it is impossible when one or both are still, holding on to the idea of something more. You don't owe anyone access to you just because, they were once close. Friendship is not a reward for surviving a breakup. It's something that must be earned again from a healed heart. And know that not everything that feels good is God's best, and not everyone you love deeply was meant to stay permanently. Sometimes God will allow a connection because it served a purpose for a season. It taught you something, it revealed something, it awakened something, but then it ended because the assignment was over. God saw conversations that you didn't. God saw text threads that you were not in. God saw decisions, temptations, compromises, and distractions, and he said, no, I love you too much to let this continue. And you better believe he's saving you from something that you couldn't see coming. So don't fight him. Don't beg him to restore something that he's already replaced with something better in the waiting. His no is always wrapped up in a bigger yes. So let God guide you on your next chapter, not your emotions, not your loneliness, not your ego, because when you finally surrender it all, the memories, the dreams, the pains, the hope, that's when he starts building something you never knew was possible. You're not weak for still hurting. You're human, but healing isn't just something that happens. It's something that you choose. So today, choose to close the door. Choose to stop chasing closure. Choose to, let go of the fantasy. Choose to trust God's plan over your emotions, because the moment that you do, your heart, it doesn't just begin to heal. It begins to awaken. And that's when the real love story starts. The one between you and the life you were always meant to live. If you enjoyed this video, you know what to do. Smash the like button for the YouTube algorithm. Subscribe if you haven't already, and hit that notification bell so you don't miss any future videos. And the YouTube algorithm also suggests that, you you'll probably like one of these videos right here. Thanks for watching. And, of course, I'll catch you on one of these videos here. Peace.